What if I told you that the effort to slow population growth and ultimately reduce population growth goes all the way back to the 1970s and started in large part with a man named David Rockefeller and his group called the Trilateral Commission, who has worked hand in hand with the UN and the World Economic Forum to create the conditions needed to slow and ultimately reduce population growth? Here's undeniable proof of that, and I'm going to debunk a portion of what he says here.
Ironically, however, the very innovations that are making possible dramatic improvements in human well-being are also creating new problems which raise the specter of an alarming and possibly catastrophic disaster to the biosphere we live in. And herein lies the dilemma that we all face. Let me illustrate. Improved public health has caused the world's infant mortality rate to decline by 60% over the last 40 years. In the same period, the world's average life expectancy has increased from 46 years in 1950s to 63 years today. This is a development which, as individuals, we can only applaud. However, the result of these positive measures is a world population that has risen during the same short period of time geometrically to almost 6 billion people and could easily exceed 8 billion by the year 2020. The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident. The rapid growing exploitation of the world's supply of energy and water is a matter of deep concern, and the toxic byproducts of widespread industrialization of...
All right, that's the first area where I need to call BS because as an oil man, David, where your whole family legacy was built off oil, you're probably very familiar with the concept of lobbying like hell against other energy threats, like nuclear energy. Nuclear energy could power the entire world. We don't need oil. Oil is just the bridge to get us to something better. We're not running low on energy. We have the technology we need to have all the power that we need. And for water, one of the most annoying things I hear is that there's a shortage of water in the world. The world's 70% water, and we have the technology to remove the salt from the water. We currently only use 1% of all the water in the world for the water we use for everything. But the technology of desalination exists. Why aren't we investing in that industry like crazy and using the ocean water that we have all around us? Now, something I do agree with is the pollution side of what he's saying. I think pollution is something that you could actually measure and put data behind to show that's a big problem. Unlike some of this climate stuff that they talk about in a more speculative way, pollution is objectively a problem. It can be measured, can be weighed, can be analyzed. And that is something that we could focus on.
Increased atmospheric pollution to dangerous levels. Unless nations will agree to work together to tackle these cross-border challenges posed by population growth, overconsumption of resources, and environmental degradation, the prospects for a decent life on our planet will be threatened. The recent UN meeting in Cairo is appropriately focused on one of these key issues, population growth. But the controversies which have erupted at the conference illustrate the problem of coming to grips with issues that are deeply divisive and which have a profound moral dimension. The United Nations can and should play an essential role in helping the world find a satisfactory way of stabilizing world population and stimulating economic development in a manner that is sensitive to religious and moral considerations.
So notice the terminology he's using there. First of all, he's a big fan of the UN, thinks that they should be at the forefront of addressing this problem. And he says policy that can be sensitive to religious and moral considerations. Now, some might see this and say, oh, yeah, he's talking about birth control. He's talking about abortion, which, I'm not somebody who's against birth control at all. I think it's a great, necessary invention. I think abortions are very sad when they happen. It's never a happy situation when you get an abortion, but sometimes they're necessary. I think we could agree that something like 3 or 4 months is an acceptable limit on how long you could wait to get one. Then maybe health considerations after that could be the only exception. Whatever, that's aside from the point. Where my mind goes with all of this is think about the things that the UN and these global leaders have been pushing, like LGBT rights, teaching young students about transgender issues, the fact that 25% of kids are now identifying as part of the LGBTQ community. You think that happened by accident, or you think that's a push by these global elites to try to slow population growth by getting kids to cut off their genitals? The fact that it's now extremely expensive to raise a child, that childcare is extremely expensive, that two parents need to work, that on average, women are graduating from college more than men, that people are waiting longer to get married, that women are being encouraged to have this attitude of not needing no man. These are all little death by 1,000 cut things to slow population growth. Now look at this chart, jarring. Population skyrockets in the 50s to the year 2000, but growth rate absolutely collapses. Now it's not necessarily a bad thing because our world probably isn't built for 12 billion people right now, but to say there's an overpopulation problem is looking at the issue very one-sidedly. Look at a demographic chart of China's population or Japan's population. It's an upside-down pyramid, and that's what the world's heading for in the next 50 years if we continue this growth rate. And I don't necessarily think that's good for anybody. Regardless,
economic growth is, of course, an inevitable corollary of a growing population and is essential to improve standards of living. But without careful coordination, unrestrained economic growth poses further threats to our environment. This was a major subject of discussion at the conference in Rio de Janeiro on the environment 2 years ago. The focus then was on sustainable growth and global development. It was pointed out at the conference that growth is most efficiently managed by the private sector, but regulation of the process by national governments and international bodies is also needed. And once again, the United Nations should certainly be among the catalysts and coordinators of this process.
So boom, there you go. He's a big advocate saying that the government should be one of the primary regulators of the economic growth of the world and that the UN should play a big part in it. So that makes my mind go to the fact that the UN was the original proponent of the ESG movement that took the world by storm a few years ago. We've been over this before. That legislation originally came from the UN, the Net Zero Asset Managers Climate Initiative, where $70 trillion of wealth is going towards this Net Zero Asset Managers Agreement, where a lot of the terminology is about things like gender equality and racial equality, social justice, environmental sustainability, making the Western countries abide by it while places like China and India do their thing. They're responsible for the vast majority of pollution. Meanwhile, we're hamstringing ourselves. And the purpose of this video is just to open your eyes to the tip of the iceberg for this topic. A lot of people know the globalist agenda, WEF, BlackRock, ESG, but you don't know where it originates from. You don't know that this has been a movement that's been pushed for decades now by the world elite. It's very dark stuff, and we're going to talk all about it in the coming weeks and months because it's the primary threat to America. The globalists hate America. They hate its independence. They hate that the international elites can't control it and do the one world government-esque type things they want to do while America's as strong as it is. The number one threat to our freedom and liberty is the globalist movement. Much more to come. God bless. Stay tuned.